Hi, and welcome to the Sip and Speak podcast. I am Samantha J. Best. And for the longest while, we have been teasing you and getting you excited about what's to come in the Sip and Speak podcast. You know, we've had a very successful social event in 2025, and you all loved it so much. So we said, you know what? We have to get this podcast rolling. So we have been conducting some interviews with some very interesting people. And I'm pretty proud to say that our first one is pretty good. I'd like to introduce you to Roderick Von King. And Roderick Von King has a very interesting story to tell. Right now, he is shopping himself around as an author, and for very much good reason. So, welcome to the podcast. Because I know you casually, I'm going to just call you Vaughn. Welcome to the podcast, Vaughn.
Okay, thank you very much.
So, Vaughn, you have a very interesting background. It starts off as an aerospace engineer, and it has landed you to Trinidad and Tobago. But I want you to clear things up for us. As much as you love Trinidad and Tobago, tell us about the journey and your roots before we get to the island that has the island republic that has your attention.
Okay. Well, first of all, my profession was an aerospace engineer. I went to college at Loyola Marymount University, and that's the shirt that I have on right here, and also the hat. So I'm representing Loyola Marymount University out of Los Angeles, California. I went to college there, received a Bachelor of Science degree in electrical engineering, and then I went on to get a master's in computer science. So that sparked my professional career in terms of aerospace engineering, which I worked in that field for 44 years. But also during that period, while I was in college, well, let me start back, not college, but in the fourth grade. In the fourth grade, I started playing music. That's the first time in public school that we were allowed to be in music program. So I was in music program from fourth grade all the way up through my 4 years of college at Loyola. I was in the music program. I had a cousin who was a professional musician by the name of Gordon DeWitty, who is now deceased. But Gordon worked with Earth, Wind, and Fire, Bobby Womack, Sly Stone, Rufus and Shaka Khan, and a lot of the top big artists. A couple of records you might be aware of, because Gordon came out of in the maybe the early late 60s, early 70s was his primary heyday. And in 1975, he played on the Rufus and Shaka Khan songs thing. So that song came out in 1975, and Gordon played keyboard on that. He also played on this song with this group R&B, Bloodstone. They had a song called Natural High. It was in 1973. Gordon played the organ on that. He also produced Johnny Nash. He played with Bobby Womack, was his band leader. Sly Stone, some white groups, Little Feat, which was a big rock and roll band in the early 70s out of Los Angeles. But the thing about Gordon was that Gordon was sightless. So due to the fact that he was sightless, um, when I came to Los Angeles in 1972 as a freshman in college, um, I started driving Gordon around, taking him to the certain studios and a certain different functions. And because he was sightless and I was his driver, I was able to come and go to a lot of places. So I got to experience a lot of things due to the fact that I was with him, and the fact that it being his cousin. So even though I was in music, I really didn't get involved with doing anything until I graduated from college. And my father asked me while I was in school, he said, please don't get out there and run in the streets with Gordon and Sly and all those people and let your studies suffer. So I didn't do that. But after I graduated from college, then I started going to the studio and hanging out more and actually started a songwriting career at that point. uh Little divergence. There's a group that I grew up with, and their name is Confunction. I don't know if anybody heard of them. Again, their mainstay was through the 80s. through the 80s. And they had a couple of big hits, R&B hits, from the States now. And one was called Fun, 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 and one was called Love Train. Those were two of their really big hits. They've had like 4 gold albums and I think 1 platinum. And so the keyboard player, Danny Thomas, the original keyboard player of Can Function, he and I went to school together. We played music together, starting in the 4th grade, 10 years old. And then Danny was 2 years older than me. So we played together in elementary school. Then when I went to 7th grade, Danny was in the 9th grade and we played in the band again. Then when I went to high school, I was in the 10th grade. Danny was in the 12th grade. So we've actually played in the band together, elementary school, junior high school, and high school. And Danny and I did a lot of writing together once I really got involved with my songwriting career, which basically took off probably around 2009, 2010 timeframe. And I moved back from the East Coast back to California. And then Danny and I were living in the same subdivision. And so we got together and started writing for probably the next 7, 8 years. So we worked every Tuesday. We wrote every Tuesday. That was like we just dedicated every Tuesday to writing. And then during that period, I got involved with soca music, and
Okay.
I
But
came to
I wanna
Trinidad.
pull it back a little bit. So
Okay,
where along this line are you an aerospace engineer? Are you already in
I'm
this
an aerospace. I'm
in this
I'm doing this all while I'm an aerospace engineer. I
Okay.
graduated from college in 1976. And then 1977, when like I said, I promised my father I wouldn't hang out with Gordon and do all that kind of stuff until I got my degree. So after I got my degree in 1977, I started hanging out with Gordon and learning the music business, but I didn't start writing until about 1978 time frame.
Okay. Awesome.
So I was an aerospace engineer all the time that I was a songwriter.
So when you're at work as an aerospace engineer, are you getting creative inspiration somewhere or you're totally compartmentalized?
I compartmentalize, but I'm writing during that time. I've written several songs on my way home from work. I had an hour commute home from work. I've written several songs on my way home from work. So
Awesome.
I'm always thinking about it, but I always do my work. So I am compartmentalized because I do my work.
You had your creative musical outlet. You're an
Yes.
aerospace engineer, so you got that in your back pocket and doing well at it. And now you are introduced to soca music. Your wife is a Trinidadian.
Yes, a Trinidadian, yes. And so as a result of being in the in the Trinidad culture, I couldn't understand what they were saying. And so it was really hard for me to learn and do things because they talk too fast. And I couldn't understand it. So and that's what when the reason that 2012 was so significant for me because I'm trying to learn and see what's going on. And at that time, Marshall Montano had a song called Mr. Fett. And Mr. Fett won the Soca Monarch. He won Soca Monarch with that song, Mr. Fett. And so my wife got the lyrics printed out for me. And I studied that song and I learned that song. And so I said, I'm going to learn this song so that I can understand. So I finally learned Mr. Fett. And so when I learned Mr. Fett, that really is what broke me into liking soca music. But I just started by studying Mr. Fett and learning all of the lyrics where I can go
Okay.
through and sing it and understand what it was talking about.
So this was like your first introduction, almost like you're learning Trini slang,
Yes.
our speech rhythm, and
Hmm.
obviously you fell in love with the music. You fell in love with the construct coming from a musical background. Tell us what was so interesting about soca music that drew you to it.
It was fast. It's like what we used to know as techno pop. You know what I mean? It was like that 140, 160 beats. per minute. So it was like very fast. And it was the reaction of the people in the terms of the whining and all the different things and how Carnival Monday and Tuesday, how everybody moved to it and how it, and I guess the major one of the major things that impressed me was that it didn't matter if you were a grandmother, mother, the child, the infant, everybody is partying to the same music. And that was so interesting to me that the entire family structure and all of the people are all enjoying the same music. And so I thought that was fabulous. Like, and growing up in America, our parents had their music style, and then the younger adults had their music style, and then the kids had their music style. And it wasn't a total embracing. I think that was probably the only time in America that really happened was in the early days of the Motown sound. And then everybody, and that was only black people primarily, that focused in on that. But everybody got into their own genres and their own age groups. But it was much different in Trinidad. And then also pan. I was really into the pan. And we would always call steel drum, and I'd always get corrected. No, it's pan, not steel drum, but that's what we knew, steel drum. And like with my cousin, for example, I talked about my cousin Gordon DeWitty. Um, he played on some different music groups like Earth, Wind, and Fire, and different people like that. And Robert Greenwich, I met Robert Greenwich in the studio in Los Angeles in the 70s, where he was playing on different people's songs. And I did not realize that he was from the Caribbean, but with his steel pan, I had the actual opportunity to meet Robert Greenwich, during that time frame. So that was another connection that just by happenstance.
So many ties bringing you to the Caribbean, bringing you to Trinidad and Tobago shores. And did you also try to recreate or produce a bit of soca yourself?
I did, and I had the opportunity to meet David Million, and he was my wife's relationship to one of the Million family members that introduced me to David. And so I got a chance to meet David and his sister Denise. So I actually flew David and Denise to California to help me learn soca and produce soca better. And how that started again with my wife's cousin Romeo Bess. And we wrote a song because Romeo had a studio. He had a studio. And so a friend of mine was down here with me from California, my best friend, Leroy Barnett. And we were friends since we were like 13 years old. And he came down with me in 2013, the first year after I came. And we went into the studio, and it was the day before we were getting ready to leave. And Leroy, Romeo, and I wrote a song. We didn't have a title to the song at the time we started it, but due to the fact that it was the night before we left, I entitled that song Last Night in Trinidad. And basically, what that song was about was all of what Trinidad meant to me, all the entire soca season, how I saw everything, and I wrote all that in that song. So then I'm now have a book that's in process. I've just started the book, and it's called Last Night in Trinidad. And basically, what it is going to be an adventure story. And in my first book, Why Didn't We Love? That's the book that I won the award for, and and it's a romance novel. And this is the book here, Why Didn't We Love, which is based on a song called Why Didn't We Love. But I have a fictional character named Bobby Vale. So what I decided to do was take that fictional character, Bobby Vale, and create a trilogy from it. So the second iteration of the trilogy is Last Night in Trinidad.
Back a little bit now. So we have ventured into the music all our life. We have aerospace engineer under our belt, and then we transition to soca, and we fall in love with the islands, and then you say it's time for me to become an author. So tell us the beginning of this particular journey, becoming an author, and then the name of that first book being Why Didn't We Love?
So that was in 1994. 1994, I got transferred to Utah. 1993, one of my good friends' wife was a very avid reader, and she challenged me to write a book. Because, like, when I told you about I'm going to all these different places with my cousin Gordon, with Sly Stone, Womack, Earth, Wind and Fire, all of that kind of stuff, and I'm telling all these stories because I can't take anybody with me, because I'm only allowed to go because I'm driving and handling Gordon. So I'm telling all these stories, and she says, "You're a great storyteller, Vaughn. I'm gonna challenge you to write a book." So I said, "Okay, I'm gonna write a book." Okay, so I agreed to the challenge, had no clue what I was gonna write. But then I went to a seminar up at UCLA because I was in Southern California. I went to a seminar at UCLA, and John Grisham was the keynote speaker. Now, for people who don't know who John Grisham is, he's an author and he's also a movie maker. He's gotten books like The Firm and The Pelican Brief. Denzel Washington and this other major actress, they were in The Pelican Brief, and then Samuel L. Jackson was in one of the Grisham movies. So it was a lot of. So he was a big movie guy, and his books turned into movies. So at the seminar, he asked everybody in the room. He says, "Does anybody know, what my profession is?" And somebody said, "You're an attorney." He said, "Yeah. So what are my books and my movies about?" They said they're about law. He said, "Great." He said, "So the first bit of advice that I want to extend to you is write what you know." So I took that note down, write what you know. So I said, "Okay, I know music, I know aerospace engineering, and so I decided that I'm going to write a story that's going to bring an aerospace engineer as the heroine, as opposed to a lawyer, a doctor, a professional athlete." And I said, "I know about aerospace engineering, so my heroine is going to be an aerospace engineer. He's also going to have some ties to music, because I know about that." So my friend by the name of Oliver Davis, who we write together, and we've been friends together since we were like 10 years old, he wrote a song called Why Didn't We Love? And Why Didn't We Love was a story about a young lady that he had met when he was in his early 20s, and they hit it off real nice and had a relationship going, broke up, and then they met about 15 years later. And then the vibe was stronger than it was the first time. And so, but things happened in life: marriage, kids, divorce, other kinds of different things. So the question was like, why didn't we love? Why didn't we do this right the first time? So that's what that song was about. So I said, I think I could create a story out of that. So I started doing research, talking to different couples, male and female individuals, and telling them about that subject. And I did not realize that that was as universal of a theme than I had thought. And people were telling me, "Oh, if I would have been with Brenda, if I would have been with John, if I would have did this." And so everybody had a story of that lost love or unrequited love that never happened. And I say, well, I kind of got one of those myself. So I ended up taking all of these notes and creating this fictional character and build it in real time of things that actually happened, and built the story Why Didn't We Love, based on what Oliver's song was. So
Mm.
that's how I started writing. So I started writing in 1993. I got transferred to Utah in 1994. Took me 6 years to finish it. I finished in 1999, and then I generated a screenplay. I wrote a screenplay because I was up in Utah and they got the Sundance Film Festival up there. And this particular year, they opened it up to first-time screenwriters. So I said, I'm gonna generate a screenplay and enter that contest. So I did that and entered the contest. Obviously didn't win, but got a lot of good comments and feedback. that I built on it. But at that time, self publishing wasn't what it is now. So I actually let it sit on the shelf for 15 years.
Hmm.
And then when I started writing again, when Danny Thomas and I got together, I was doing a lot of gospel stuff and contemporary Christian music at that time. And but then I got into the soca and started doing that. And I said, now it's time to resurrect Why Didn't We Love? So I had an opportunity to enter a contest with the book because the book was done. So I ended up just getting it, edited and put out. And then I entered a contest and I ended up getting selected and the book won for best romance.
Oh, wow. Congratulations.
And then they said, well, now we're going to do a thing for author of the year in each of the categories. So if you want to submit your book, I submit you do that. So I went ahead and submitted for that. And I ended up winning author of the year for Why Didn't We Love in Best Romance. And
Wow,
then
congrats. So now
so
that we talked to some of these unexpected accolades, what
mhm,
kind of advice, because you didn't think that your journey would have brought you to these spaces. You're just
mhm,
you're just giving yourself the outlets that you've always wanted, trying things you've never done before. What
mhm.
advice would you pass on to persons who have been procrastinating on their wants, their desires, maybe even dreams?
I would say you have to do it. You got to be committed and do it because that's one of the. I did it. I just set it on the shelf because I didn't find the publishing outlet that I was looking for. I submitted it and went through those stages, but got rejected and didn't really move forward. So I just said, well, I'm going to wait until I can self publish. And then that way you don't have to give all your rights away. And, a lot of things that other people have to do, even with songwriting. If you want to come in, sometimes they take all your rights and you don't own your music and this and that and the other. And see, the thing that aerospace engineering offered me was I made enough money that I didn't have to do any of this stuff to eat. I didn't have to
Mm,
publish a book and make money for it to eat. I didn't have to submit songs and make money from it in order to eat. So it allowed me to do the things that I really wanted to do the way that I wanted to do it. And that's what it really offered me. But at the same time, like I said, I still had to do it. And it wasn't that I didn't do it. I did the work. I just put it on the shelf because I found that it wasn't the right time to move forward with that, at the things of what I was doing. So when I slowed down, got close to retirement, I said, well, I can start bringing this stuff out now, because I don't have anything to lose. So again, I don't have to do this to eat. So I'm not stressing over the fact if something happens or doesn't happen. But in terms of people who are wanting to do something, you have to do it. I mean, I put the time in. I wrote the songs. I wrote the book. I edited the book. I did all of those things. I wrote the screenplay. But it's just that I chose the right time, the things to do it. But now it is the ultimate time to do it, and particularly with AI. So it's a lot of things that you have to do. Matter of fact, when I wrote my second book, I used AI in terms of research, not to have AI write stuff for me, but to streamline my research. But then you got to double check it too. But at the same time, you got to really be diligent with anything, any tool, because a tool is just a tool, and you need to
right.
learn how to use it.
So the tools are there, the opportunities are there. What about that self confidence when it comes to, because somebody will say, so you don't have any credibility to write a romance for us. You're an
Hmm.
aerospace engineer. And how does an aerospace engineer from the United States come and produce soca music? So, these things where we feel if we didn't travel through a particular journey for an entire life or created it as part of our
Hmm.
identity, it's almost like incorrect for us to venture into new things. And
Hmm.
then there's also, of course, with that, the fear of judgment from others.
Hmm.
How do you operate in terms of that?
Judgment from others never bothered me. Story, when I was in college, I didn't do drugs and things like that. Never bothered me. So I had some people, we were driving from Los Angeles down to San Diego, going to a certain place. and these guys broke out some drugs that want to start doing my car. I pulled over. I said, y'all got to get out, and you don't do this in my car. So you got to get out, go handle your business. I'm gonna drive up. When you finish, you come up. You were square. You go, man, I'm gonna be all of that. That don't bother me. Names don't bother me because I'm in control of what I do and what things happen to me. So I take control. Never, ever since I was a kid, I've always been a leader. I've never been a follower. And I've never been scared to be called a square or this or that or none of that name calling because I knew the path that I was on and I was on my path for me. I wasn't on my path for my best friend. I wasn't on my path for my girlfriend. I was on my path for me, and I knew what I was doing, so I had no problem. Never, ever bothered me about what some other people might say. And then, like I said, I got rejection all the time, even from like my friends in Confunction. I submitted some songs that I thought would have been great songs for them, turned them down. Okay, well, okay, but I'm not going to stop writing. I still think it's a good song, and so I still produced it. And that song is one of the main songs that's in my book, Why Didn't We Love? One of the songs that Confunction turned down. You just move on with what you're doing. And I've never had a problem with that. So I would tell anybody writing, if you have a desire, then you go ahead and finish your thought because your thought is your thought and your thought is unique. So, and that's what makes you unique. If other people don't like it, then that might be a good sign because that shows that you're unique. And then you can make that happen, but you got to finish it. You have to follow through. And that's one of the
Yes.
things that I think that I've always learned and held as a standard for myself.
Yes, and that they just say that they say ideas are practically worth nothing. It's the execution. So let's roll into the execution of your second book that you're still working on. It's
No,
complete.
we're in the third book because the second book is a book about um uh my contribution to the Great Commission in terms of Christianity. Okay, and
Okay.
it's called Altar Call. And it's Altar Call, an honest depiction of a path to salvation. Now, the reason that I chose that is because I wrote a song called Altar Call. And so I took that. I was at a friend of mine came to town and we were sitting down talking and we went to church together back in California. And I'm living where I'm living now in the East Coast, right outside of DC. And he came to the DC area and I went and took him to lunch and we were talking and I was telling them that how disappointed I was that Altar Call didn't become the kind of song that I thought it should be bigger than what I thought it should be. Because like when they go to in church, they always do this song what they call invitation when they bring up people to accept Christ and that kind of thing. And they would use different songs. And I said, well, how come it's not a song called Altar Call? Because what they call that process is an altar call. So I wrote a song called Altar Call. And then I produced this the gospel album on this guy named Michael Nelson, and we did Altar Call on that album. And I also produced a girl named Carla Brown years before I did Michael Nelson, and she did Altar Call as well. And and so I was talking to my friend Anthony, and Anthony said, "Well, Vaughn, it's not over." So I just said, "You're right." And so I ended up writing this book called Altar Call, which is nonfiction. Now, Why Didn't We Love is fiction. Uh, Last Night in Trinidad is going to be fiction, but Altar Call is nonfiction. So basically, what it is how I came to the understanding of religion, Christ, salvation, all of that. It's my story. So therefore it's nonfiction. And the different things that I thought about. I mean, I addressed things like evolution versus creation. I addressed a lot of controversial subjects because I wanted to say what my approach or my understanding was. And then I decided to write that. I said maybe somebody else might have the same kind of thoughts I had. And so I ended up putting that book together. So that's the second book in Trinidad. And then the third book of the trilogy is going to be about my years in Utah because that was a different experience as well. So I'll take the same Bobby Vale character and I'll write another fiction story, but based on his character, but based on the real things that Utah experienced to a black man.
So you said you're in retirement, you've done the music, you've had the career. So would you say that plan to spend the rest of your life as an author?
And screenplay writer and music. So I'll be
Okay.
songwriter, screenwriter, author. That's what I do. That's what I
That
am now.
okay. So definitely that's what I was gonna ask. If that's what you're going to do or that's who you are.
That's who I am. I am an author. I'm a published author. I'm a published songwriter. And I've written a screenplay that has yet to be turned into anything yet. But that's what I'm working on. So, but that's what I'm doing.
And I really like how you say that, how it's not it's about to be something yet. And you use that a lot. That, as you say and you mentioned before, everything will happen in its right time.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And you don't
Yes.
have any fears or panic or anxiety about it. And we are living in a society now where everything needs to have instant gratification, especially with the internet, right? That's where all the get rich schemes come from. It's like, I'm going to be the expert in my field now. I am going to become that millionaire now. So a lot of persons are kind of battling with time. And this is where I think the anxiety comes from. And then when they don't see things happen in the imaginary timelines that they set for themselves, which are sometimes less than a week, and they don't see the results they want, they kind of give up and they move
Mm-hmm.
on to the
Mm-hmm.
next thing and they move on to the next thing. But you would be a true testament to say that you had a book written there, shelved it for 15 years,
Mm-hmm.
technically, and brought it back to life.
Mm-hmm. And here's an interesting thing that happened. And Soca, not Soca, but COVID was one of the things that really messed me up in terms of my timetable. Like I said, I was working with David Million and I was doing different things. And my wife, her father, Sonny Roach, is a steel pan pioneer. So I wrote a song called Ode to Sonny Roach. And it was just what I learned about him. And so that's just the kind of things I do. You know, I learned about him. So I said, I'm going to write a song about Sonny Roach. You know what I mean? So I wrote a song about Sonny Roach. My guy, Danny Thomas from Confunction, he and I put all this stuff together. And then Duvon Stewart happened to be in San Francisco. And I lived about 20 miles from San Francisco. And I met Duvon Stewart at a Trinidadian August 31st function.
And for
And because
those
I
who may
joined,
not know Mr. Stewart, could you give us some background on him?
he was an arranger for BP Renegades. And he's a 9-time steel pan solo champion out of Tobago. And then he was at the time he was the arranger for BP Renegades. And so he came over to my studio and played the steel pan solo for my song Ode to Sonny Roach. I was in Trinidad in 2020 when COVID hit. I was actually there when COVID hit. My stepdaughter was living in the same area where Bugsy was living. So I used to go down and talk to Bugsy every morning, while I'm there. So I showed Bugsy my music, my Americanized version of Soca. And I showed him, and then he was playing me some Sly Stone stuff and different things like that, because we are the same age and the same era. So Bugsy say, man, I want to work with you on your songs. Where other people were like, get that out of here. That ain't, I say, man, it's my version, and I ain't giving up on it. I like what I wrote. So you ain't gotta like it. I like it. So I got the lyrics and all that, and they say, man, your lyrics is on point. You really understand this. But David Million said, your drums just ain't right. So Dave helped me with the drums, you know what I mean? And so I helped with drums. Then I had another guy from Trinidad that I had met who helped me with some drum stuff as well, But then I was going ready to work with Bugsy. And then that went after COVID hit, I didn't get a chance to come back, and I didn't get a chance to work, so we never did. But he had agreed to work with me, and we were going to do the stuff, and I was going to fly him out to California just like I did David and Denise. But the COVID thing just kind of messed everything up. And then at that point, that's when I moved into the book writing. And then so then I kind of got distracted from that as I was doing the book and the screenplay became more center stage.
Mm. Well, that's understandable because, yes, a lot of people discovered self publishing and book writing during COVID because, you
Hmm.
could not move around, you could not be around too many people.
Right, right.
So that was a time when self publishing really exploded
Hmm.
above and beyond. So it makes a lot of sense of where the writing would have taken over. As we're getting ready to almost wrap things up, we know
Hmm.
you have your third book coming, all dedicated to Trinidad and Tobago. I love
Hmm.
the fact that you know so much about us that we probably don't know about ourselves. And I could see the sparkle in your eyes and the excitement in your voice when you talk about Trinidad and Tobago and the culture and the talent and the inclusivity that we get to experience here, something that I know we generally take for granted because we're in it
Hmm.
all the time and we always think there's something better on the other side of the ocean or
Hmm.
somebody's grass is greener on the other side. So it's really interesting to hear from your point of view how much we have to offer to not just the world, but just for ourselves. And I
Right.
am truly honored too that, you embraced our culture so much and can show us and also relate to us about that confidence portion to, really do what you have your heart and your mind set onto, and that you don't need anybody else's approval except your
Right,
own.
right. Say about the Last Night in Trinidad book is that it's going to be like about a 12 chapter book. And every chapter, the name of the chapter is the song that I wrote. I wrote 12 soca songs. So every chapter is about a soca song that I wrote and what inspired me to write that song. So I wrote
Mm.
one song called Jamming on the Road. Okay. And how that song came about was I was watching on CCTV, the Carnival Tuesday, going across the stage, you know what I mean, and looking at that. And then there was a lady who was a costume designer. So as her group had finished coming across the stage, the people who were hosting came up and talked to her about her designs for the costumes and this and that and the other. And one of the things she said, she was talking about what she made the costumes out of and the reason that, she did the way that she did design it the way that she did because the costumes gotta take a lot of jamming on the road, I say, oh man, jamming on the road, that's a good title. So I wrote a song, Jamming on the Road, for example. I was in they went they another this is the last one. I'll talk about this song. They went to my wife and their family went down south and it was hot. And I said, I'm not going down to the country and being out on all of that, and so I'm gonna stay in the house. Well, they locked the door in the house and they turned the air conditioner off. I didn't know they left the back door open because it's normally padlocked. So I didn't even go check. So I thought I was locked in the house and then no AC was on and I was burning up. And so I started writing a song called Make It Hot. And I just was like, and there's every kind of thing that I could think of. And I ended up writing this song called Make It Hot, you know, because it was like, just all the stuff that I was doing, you know what I mean? That kind of thing. So I got all these different songs that got stories behind them. And each one of those stories is a chapter. And it's about the adventure of being in Trinidad and then the experience resulting into a song and that whole thing.
Trini inspired book is definitely going to be a musical.
Yes, yes. And I was talking to a guy when I was talking to him. I had a podcast interview with him about why didn't we love? And then I was telling him about last night in Trinidad. He said, "Man, I could just see the colors exploding on the scene and the music." He said, "Man, I'm interested in that book." I said, "Well, that's just a concept right now. I haven't even started. I mean, the songs were written, all 12 songs had been written, but I hadn't started putting the book together yet. I just had the concept of what I was going to do." But he liked that idea. He says, "I can see a musical out of that with the
Yeah,
colors and the,
definitely. That is definitely a musical, and
yeah."
it will suit, theater stage, works well for
Hmm.
the band, and then imagine
Right,
when it gets
right.
on Netflix, right?
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely.
I would like to thank you so much for taking the time to spend with us and give us your insights and really push us and encourage us to live our dreams. Thank you so much, Vaughn. Roderick Von King here on the Sip and Speak podcast.